Aveil, as I said, if you could just introduce yourself and your talk that you did today.
Yes, my name is Aveil Oberhammer. My talk was Behind the Bridle, Understanding Facial Expressions in Horses Before and After Riding. So we examined horses during pre-lesson interactions, which was before they interacted with the rider, after putting on the saddle, after putting on the bridle, and then comparing that for post-lesson interactions, so immediately after the ride and then after untacking, to understand how each phase of the rider interactions affect their effective state.
Great. And I think that's so important as well, because when we think about kind of quantifying welfare and measuring welfare, thinking about measuring behaviour and physiology, so you're taking the behaviour side, so we can really kind of push in that direction and then start to combine it with the physiology side, so then we can gain a better understanding, especially before, during and after as well. I think the before part was super interesting. Could you just go over that part of the study and what you found there?
Yeah, so we hypothesized that pre-lesson interactions would have a greater effect on stress-related facial expressions, and this is primarily because the rider has a bit of their own anxiety when they're interacting with the horse at this stage. Whether anxiety is the wrong term, I would say arousal. It could be anxiety, it could be excitement, but especially with beginner riders, they might be more nervous when they don't have as much experience interacting with horses, and a lot of those pre-interactions are independent with that rider and the horse. The coach is not there helping them through that for most of it, and so those, I kind of forgot your question at this point.
Yeah, no, just what you found. No, that is pretty much answered it. But just talking about what you found with the results, but in particular, as you said, with your hypothesis being that the kind of ridden behaviour would be kind of where you saw most responses.
Exactly.
Like facial responses.
Yeah. And actually, I think it was interesting that actually the significant results were a decrease in that behavior, and then immediately post-ride was the increase.
Sure, yes. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
No, it's okay. And I really feel like they were suppressing those emotions. I think there's some sort of learned compliance at that point, because fidgeting is very discouraged in horses, especially when they're meant to stand still, get tacked up, get groomed. And there's training aids that prevent oral movements in particular, like nose bands or tongue clips. So if they were taught that they're supposed to just stand still, it's expected that they would just have that blank expression. And even though they weren't very expressive, you can see it in their face. It's almost like their eyes were glazed over and they're not focusing on anything. So it's like they're disengaging from their entire environment and just succumbing to, the situation that they're in.
And using EquiFACS as well, I think it's as you know, especially studying it, that it still needs to be developed a lot more in horses, because we still don't have some of those emotional components that have been measured using EquiFACS, and we're still trying to kind of categorize and be able to say, this is what frustration looks like, this is what contentness or relaxation looks like. And especially when it comes to the positive affective states, we're struggling a little bit more there, but it's coming. It's coming. So
I had to cut so much from my presentation. I did actually have a significant portion on positive affective states.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because I anticipated that someone might ask, I have such a good bond with my horse, how do I know if it's positive? But the positive literature is, first of all, none of them use the same stimulus, so I can't say that they're very comparable. But then the stimuli that they use is quite confusing. Like, one of them offers treats, like sure, food reward is a good positive state for a horse, but they had them go into a chute. So they compared horses going into a chute with no treat versus horses going into a chute with a treat. But that going into the chute can be a negative experience for horses. And then another one was looking at human vocalizations on the horse, and so they used human laughter as the positive indicator, but a horse might not interpret that as a positive or rewarding experience. And so we don't really have any conclusions on what is a positive expression. There is a new paper that came out on play faces, which I think is interesting, but play behavior is not really seen that commonly in adult horses, so I think more definition is needed in that component. Even the literature that we have now on pain and stress, it's a better developed, but I think still has a long way to go. And EquiFACS is adapted in many different research papers. Like, some people look at frequency, some look at duration. Not a lot of consistency there. We don't know what's best. There's also two different analysis methods. So there's co-occurrence, and then there's the human facts interpretation. which is better, we don't know. There's a lot to go for. And I did a literature review before I did this on pain assessments in general, and looking at other facial expression like analyses like the horse grimace scale, and also looking at other equids, so the donkey grimace scale as well. There's elements that I think EquiFACS potentially glazed over, and even doing my own coding, I'm like, well, you know, the eyelid twitch, like I coded that as upper lip razor, but is that really the same thing? I don't think so. So I think there needs to be an expansion of EquiFACS personally, and also looking at bilateral movement of the ears, because it's not always uniform, and maybe adding wink as well, because blinking is not always synchronous as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot the word for a second.
No, that's you know what, that's also a very difficult thing that I know with EquiFACS that they've said, because with the studies that they've done on dogs and humans and rats and mice and everything, being able to see their entire face is very useful, whereas we don't get that, unfortunately. Exactly. So being able to, unfortunately, we don't have that advantage of being able to see their full face. So that's a difficult one, especially as you said, as it's not like uniform in their responses.
We did also try doing EquiFACS from a front facial view to see both of those eyes, but it wasn't good at looking at the mouth movements. So I think it could potentially be, if you have 3 different views, the 45-degree angle, the side angle, and the front angle, all happening at the same time. But you'd need quite an elaborate setup for that, and that could influence the horse. And I've also read, and I do believe my study has this limitation as well, that horses will respond differently when humans are around. Gemma Pearson spoke about that as well. So having a good setup where you're removing that influence as well is going to be quite difficult.
That's a really, I know it's so difficult with trying to set up a perfect testing environment or research environment, and I know it's so difficult, especially when it comes to behaviour observations and thinking about all of the factors that can contribute to their behaviour and how they're responding and what you're recording. Like it's incredible.
But then, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. When you think about the practical view as well, like I didn't go into what qualifies as my inclusion criteria, but one that we tried to have was that the horse wasn't obviously distracted, but even if the horse was, it wasn't necessarily excluded, because that's still a realistic interpretation of their environment, right? When we look at these perfect environments where there's no humans around, and you know, it's great, we do learn a lot, but that's not what the horse is experiencing every single day. And if we are trying to create research that horse owners can actually use, then they're not going to see this perfect environment reaction. So I think it's important that we consider the limitations, but also try to still interpret it realistically.
Absolutely. I think there's pros and cons to both. It's like, because even though they would be exposed to real life scenarios in one environment is completely different into another environment. Like a horse could be on an extremely busy yard, or versus a competition yard or a DIY private yard. Like it's, I don't know whether, because I think a lot of the work that comes out initially, it is this perfect environment, and then you start to incorporate one thing, then another thing, and then try and build it in that way. But I think what the issue is at the moment is research consistency, as you said, and I feel like that's across the board. But I feel like especially in the kind of in equine science, our consistency is quite lacking.
But
it is also difficult.
It is very difficult, and it also depends who's willing to participate in your study and working around their schedules. Like we couldn't account for, so we did take in their daily workload, like for that particular day at the time that we were filming them, but it's not like we looked at every single horse at their first lesson of the day. It could be their last lesson at 8 p.m., right? Because that's just when the owner allowed us to come to the farm. So equine research is quite difficult in that sense.
Well, I think I remember having to do an assignment where you create a perfect study, and it was potentially realistic if you had a lot of money, but like a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of people, a lot of time. Unfortunately, as you said, it's not realistic, and you have to take in the considerations, the time, not just the horses but the owners, what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, and where you're doing your study, how you're doing your study. So no, I understand that difficulty.
And we really wanted that realistic interpretation of their experience. So even if a rider put on tack wrong, if it wasn't corrected, it wasn't corrected. Because that means even if we weren't there, the horse would still be riding that way. We didn't change any of the tack that they used. We didn't comment on any of their equitation. Like, this was just what the horse was experiencing. But that's why my random effects did have significant results, because that horse and the facility both it's so highly individual. So it is
that's
what
super
it is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Aveil, thank you so much. That was really great. Thank you.